Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Peninsula Clean Energy Board meeting for Thursday, June 9th. We'll start with a roll call.
Great. Hi, everyone. If you could please say your first and last name when I read your jurisdiction. County of San Mateo.
Dave Pine.
County of San Mateo. Jim Magelmeyer. Town of Atherton.
Rick DeGolia.
City of Belmont. City of Brisbane.
Lori Liu.
City of Burlingame.
Donna Colson.
Town of Colma.
Joe Silva.
City of Daly City. City of East Palo Alto.
Larry Moody.
I didn't know we did that.
City of Foster City.
Catherine Mahampur for Gary Pollard.
City of Half Moon Bay.
Not yet.
Town of Hillsborough.
Liz Cullinan for Larry May.
City of Menlo Park. City of Millbrae.
Wayne Lee.
City of Pacifica.
John Keener.
Town of Portola Valley.
Jeff Alts.
City of Redwood City.
Ian Ben.
City of San Bruno.
Marty Medina.
City of San Carlos. City of San Mateo. City of South San Francisco.
Pradeep Gupta.
And Town of Woodside.
Daniel Yost.
Great.
Okay, very good. You know, I did not realize until tonight that the cities were alphabetical. Okay, very good. So we have been administering the oath to any member of the board or alternate who hadn't attended in the past. Is anyone a new attendee? I believe so. Probably can take this off the agenda going forward. I think we've sworn in pretty much everyone. Next, as is usual, we would invite public comment from anyone in the audience who'd like to speak to an item that is not on the agenda. I do think we have one slip. That is Mark Solte. I'm probably mispronouncing that. Mark, do you want to come on up?
Well, thank you. I'll be brief. So, my name's Mark Tholke. I'm a resident of Montera, California, which is in San Mateo coastside. And I just wanted to say three things. First of all, really applaud the effort here for the CCA on the Peninsula. I've been in the renewables business for 10 and a half years, most recently with a company called EDF Renewable Energy for 8.5 years. I was responsible and accountable for building large wind and solar projects in California. And I'm with a company now called Golden State Renewable Energy, and we are going to be targeting smaller scale solar PV projects. And I just wanted to, my third point really is just to suggest that locally sited solar projects can be done and can be done cost effectively. You don't have to go out to farmland and build solar projects. I've done that. You don't have to chew up farmland. It can be done to build local infrastructure in the areas that you're serving. So it won't be all of the power, but I'd like to suggest it could be a portion of the power. Also, I have a news article that I saw today. I'm going to give it to Caroline, who I met at the door. But it just talks about the growth of CCAs in general. And if anybody wants to read one, it wasn't written by me. It was just something I saw this morning. So.
Well, thanks for joining us tonight. And if you can just make sure that Carolyn has your email and phone so we can stay in touch. Perhaps there's some
I'd like that. Thanks.
opportunities to do some things together. And we'll circulate that article to the board. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak? Okay, so, seeing none, we'll move to set the agenda and approve the consent items. The only consent item is the minutes. So if we, unless there are any issues with the minutes, we could take a motion to set the agenda and approve the consent items. Okay, so we had a motion by Mr. Lee and a second by Mr. Gupta. And all in favor? Aye. And we had 2 abstentions. So Ian, Lori, and Donna? All right, no objections. All right, then let's get into the business at hand. So my primary point as the chair is that it's been great to have Jan here, and she has been going 100 miles an hour, and we'll update you about all the activities of the enterprise. The only thing I wanted to point out this evening was we are still, of course, encouraging cities to consider signing up for the 100% clean option for their municipality. And we have, I believe, 6 or 7 cities that have agreed to do that. And if your city hasn't made a decision, we'd urge you to give that serious thought. Hope is we could lead by example. The city, like any other ratepayer, of course, has time to make that decision. But again, it's something that we're hopeful that we'll see most of our cities go in that direction. I also should mention that I attended a conference along with Jan and Jeff at Stanford. There's an annual energy summit, and there was a panel on CCAs. The primary panelists were actually the Silicon Valley Community Choice folks, but we were there as well. It was a great debate about between leading experts about whether nuclear power, what's the role of nuclear power in this day when we're facing such climate challenges, and is it part of the solution? So that was fascinating. But other than that, I think I'm ready to turn over to Jan to give everyone a thorough update on what's happening.
Supervisor Pine. So a lot has been going on. I've been here for 2 weeks now. It's great. We have a great staff here to work with, and they're all excellent, doing great work, so it makes my job a lot easier. So the first very exciting thing is one of our critical path items has been met, and we got approval today from the CPUC for our implementation plan. So now we can start signing contracts and moving forward. So that's it's great to see. I also would like to schedule meetings with each of you. I think I said this last time, and Carolyn will be contacting you. So I'd like to meet you for lunch or breakfast or whatever. And if Supervisor Pine or Councilmember Alfs can come along too, then we'll try to make that happen. So just over the course of the next few weeks, there's 22 of you, so it may take a little bit of time, but just to understand what your concerns are and understand where your community is at to make sure that we're meeting your needs. We're currently looking for office space. Jim has graciously provided some space in his office of sustainability for PCE right now, but we do plan to grow, and we're looking around for office space. So we'll update you on that. We also have a implementation plan timeline. Do we have that? Oh, okay. Actually, let's go back to the previous. Oh, yeah, now, here's our timeline. We just wanted to kind of give you an idea of what's coming down the pike. So we'll be talking more tonight about the banking, but the actual approval of the banking, the ESP proposals, and the rates are scheduled for our next board meeting. In July, the first meeting of July, we will definitely be going over the budget and getting your approval on that. We'll also be discussing renewables and greenhouse gas emissions. We had a little bit of discussion about that a couple weeks ago, and really, what's the kind of messaging that we want to get out there. So we're working on a white paper to really lay out for you the background on renewables and GHGs, what the different protocols are, what the different compliance requirements are, and how we want to present that to our customers. We'll also talk about net energy metering. It's not such a simple thing when it comes right down to it, so we want to have a discussion about that as well. We are still on target to launch on October 1st to switch over our first customers, and so our first notice for this phase 1 batch of customers will go out about mid-July. The second notice will go out mid-August. We'll be sending the list to PG&E around September 9th, and they'll start processing those enrollments for the next couple weeks, and then our customers will start being phased in. The third notice will go out towards the end of October, and then the fourth notice will go out towards the end of November. We just wanted to kind of give you a heads up on what's coming down the pike. Our next board meeting will on June 23rd, because we have 3 meeting items. There will be a long one, and so we're just asking you to be prepared. It might go past 9:30. Caroline will be in touch with you about that. The next thing is outreach and marketing. So we have the next slide up there. So these are the sub-branding names that we have settled on. So the default product will be Eco Plus. That's our at least 50% renewable and at least 75% GHG free. And then the Eco 100 will be the 100% renewable, 100% GHG free product. So hopefully everyone likes that. We like it. So that's what we're moving forward with. As far as additional outreach and marketing, there was a Millbrae community workshop where 35 people attended, so that was very good attendance. In the next couple of weeks, we'll be tabling at 5 events: North Fair Oaks Bike Rodeo, the Hillsborough Environmental Day, the Menlo Park Block Party, the County Fair on multiple days, and the Burlingame Hotel Sustainability Workshop. We also have completed the photo and video shoot. That was very successful, and we continue to invite all of you to suggest luminaries in your community that we might want to have in future photo shoots, and locations that you think would be good that your residents will relate to. Let's see. The rest of this, PG&E released its initial rate forecast for 2017 on June 1st, and they also released their proposal for what the PCEA, that's the exit fee, that they're proposing for next year. And surprisingly enough, the PCEA went up. Right now, for 2016, it's 2.3 cents. They're proposing 2.86 cents. Not good. And for their rates, they're proposing dropping their rates about 3%. So it's good to know that, and we'll be taking that into account as we come to you at the next meeting with our rate proposal. Our plan is still to offer the default product at several percent below PG&E, and once we get all our numbers together and run through the new numbers, we'll come to you with that. We'll be working with the other CCAs to determine kind of what our strategy is to go to the PUC and, try to understand how PG&E came up with that number for the PCEA, and try to make sure that it's fair and reasonable and hopefully lower. So there will be more on that in the future. And that's about it. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone might have, or we'll just keep moving on. Okay. Thank you. Yes.
Will there be a formal presence before the PUC representing the CCAs with respect to the PCEA? How's that for a few acronyms?
That was impressive.
That was good. We'll have to figure that out. I think comments are due to the PUC based on PG&E's proposal, and I haven't talked to the other CCAs. I think Sean Marshall's going to be here later tonight, and she may be able to update us on what the plan is for that. but we definitely need to be speaking with one voice and kind of educating the PUC as to how, I think, how many customers are going to be CCA customers, and, you know, what's their role? How, you know, how should they be looking at CCA customers as opposed to customers who stay with PG&E, and, you know, what's fair and reasonable? So.
Jen, well, my impression is that our joint inputs into these proceedings is officially has been already reserved, in the sense we are party to the proceedings. So we will be able to participate. The question will be to send our inputs in by due date, to be able to confirm that.
Right, and I think Sean will be able to speak to that more, because their proposal came out on June 1st. There's a certain amount of time we have before we can submit reply comments, and we need to get on that quickly, obviously. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jan. So our next item is to update the board on our banking and financial arrangements. And I think we're going to start with, I'll turn it over to Mr. Bolander.
Thank you. Good evening, board, honorable board members. I'm Mike Bolander with the Office of Sustainability. Originally, we had this item on for an action item, but unfortunately, we received the agreement from Barclays late last night, and so don't have that for your review and approval today. So what we would ask is that this item be continued to the 23rd, where we will have the agreement ready for your review and signature. Like I stated, we did decide to go with Barclays for the financing partner for the Peninsula Clean Energy Authority. I want to give a special thank you to Supervisor Pine and council members Alf, Coulson, and Carlton, who are part of the board subcommittee that gave us direction on the priorities of the board for the selection of Barclays. We also, in the process of creating the agreement with Barclays, we found the need to retain outside counsel for review of the agreement, and so we retained Norton Rose and Fulbright, who will be working with us on the review of the agreement in association with our county council. The managing partner with Norton Rose is a man by the name of Eric Tashman, who the county has worked with on previous financing deals. So we are confident with our relationship with him and Norton Rose, and they've given us every assurance that they'll have review done in ample time for us to bring it to the board on the 23rd. That's my update for now, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have. Thank you.
Yes, Donna.
I'd just like to comment and tell everybody that the staff did an amazing job on this analysis. I'm used to working in the world of finance and this banking and stuff, and I'm thinking, oh, this is the county, and look at the D-line. Let me tell you, they knocked it out of the park. They were on top of it. They were excellent. They really understood the whole concept. They modeled it quickly, efficiently, clearly, and made our jobs, Jeff and I and Dave, our jobs really, really easy. And I just really want to thank the staff for that really amazing hard work and their turnaround and understanding of what we needed to get that work done.
And thanks for those comments, Donna. And we also learned through the process that it was a competitive process and really worked to our benefit. I mean, the terms just kept getting better and better. But as you'll learn a little bit about tonight, there's a lot of complexity with the flow of funds and the so-called lockbox structure, and all that had to be factored into our choice of a bank. So maybe that's a good segue to Mr. Silverman.
Yes, good evening, everyone. David Silverman. So one of the things that we've been working on significantly over the last 2 months is the power purchase agreements. And we've spoken before, you know about the RFP, it went out, you saw it before it went out. And we got a number of proposals back, and we shortlisted 3 proposers to begin negotiating with, and we've been doing that now for about a month. And you're going to hear this a number of times this evening. The meeting on the 23rd is going to be very involved. And one of the things you're going to be asked to do is approve a form of power purchase agreement. And in your packet, you received 5 documents that are going to make up what we're going to ask you to approve on the 23rd. And I didn't count up every page, but I think there's about 100 pages. And normally the goal with a contract is to make it as understandable as possible. The goal is that anyone could read it and know exactly what everyone is supposed to do. That is not how I would describe these contracts. They are nothing like that whatsoever. They are filled with jargon, and they are extremely complex. And because of that, we retained on behalf of Peninsula Clean Energy, Steve Hall, who has helped us both draft and negotiate the agreements. And because you are going to be doing so much at the meeting on the 23rd, we thought it would be helpful to begin today to walk you through each one of the agreements, give you a sense of what they do and what the important terms are in them, so that tonight and leading up to the 23rd, hopefully you can provide us any feedback or questions you may have, with the expectation on the 23rd being that you won't need to spend a great deal of time talking about those, because you'll also be dealing with the financing and, more importantly, the rate setting. So with that, what I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce and bring up Steve Hall, our outside counsel. He is a partner at Troutman Sanders, and we selected him based on a number of recommendations that were made to us. He has served in this role for Sonoma Clean Power, for Marin Clean Energy, and for Lancaster. So he knows what he's doing, and he's a pretty nice guy, too, for a lawyer. So with that, I will introduce him and turn it over to him.
Well, it's hard to top that introduction. As I was looking at the slideshow earlier and the list of the different documents, one thing I think that people should keep in mind is that, we've talked about financing, we got an update on that. There's the mention of the lockbox, mention of the power purchase agreements. All of these things fit together. There's no need for the lockbox without the energy agreements. They all fit together. And so what I thought to help get everybody on the same page would be to kind of walk through the agreements, and by the end of this, nobody will be an expert on this, but maybe you'll have a better sense of how they fit together, what the rationale is for why we have these. Okay, so the first thing that I would like to talk about is just the idea of having a contract for electricity. Okay, you think of contracts out there in the world. Electricity is just a commodity contract. You could be buying wheat or oil or electricity. Electricity is a little different. It's continuously supplied every second of every day. It's a product that can't be stored, and it's expensive. The agreements that we're talking about for the volumes of electricity here for 3 or 4 years, it's going to be north of $200 million. So it's a big purchase, and this is the kind of thing that you just can't step into with no money down. So that's why we have the lockbox and the financing structure. So in addition to being a commodity under a contract that's continuously supplied, you can't store it, it's also highly regulated. And so that makes these contracts different. And not only is the sale of electricity regulated, but the other thing that's regulated is under California state law, you have renewable portfolio standards. So we have to purchase, we legally required to purchase certain amounts of renewable energy, which all needs to be documented and verified. We need to purchase resource adequacy, which just means that there's backup power supply available. And without getting into the details of that, all of that needs to be documented, confirmed, and paid for. So that's what we're trying to do. Okay, so to do this, there's a standard agreement. And David, did you?
They have all of them.
Okay, all right. You don't need to open them up, but I'll just hold it up. Okay, so how are we documenting this? Not on a cocktail napkin and not on a one-off agreement, but we're using an industry standard form, which is the Edison Electric Institute agreement. And so this is an agreement that if you're in the electric power industry, from California to New York or anywhere in the United States, all the major utilities, all of the major energy traders, all of the independent power producers, they're all familiar with this form of documentation. Having said that, it's not something where you just change the names and the dates and sign it and you're done. It's a standard form agreement that everybody uses for reference, but there are provisions that are negotiated, and where we're at any given time right now is probably about 45 to 50 amendments to this agreement. And so, as David mentioned, we've spent negotiating with 3 different bidders on the short list. So, negotiations with each bidder, negotiating those amendments. And just to make up a number, I would say that the amendments are probably about 75 or 85% similar between each party, but each company that we're bidding with comes from a different place. Companies with A credit ratings, companies with triple B plus credit ratings, and they have different requirements. So that's what's being negotiated are, amendments to this agreement. And this agreement, and I'm happy to answer any questions about it, but what this would cover are things like credit terms. How do you provide credit? And payment terms, and liability terms, and indemnity, and confidentiality. And this agreement's an industry standard agreement, but in its default form, without making any changes to it, it's not acceptable for the transaction that you want to do. It's not customized for a public agency. There are provisions in there which are industry standard for utilities and energy traders, but that would expose the county or the JPA or the CCA to much more liability than would be acceptable for folks in this room. So those are the kinds of things that we're negotiating. Happy to talk about that, but to keep it moving. So what that puts in place is an enabling agreement with the seller. That doesn't buy you any electricity. There's no megawatt hours or renewable energy or anything associated with that. That just puts in place the relationship between the parties. And one way of looking at it is when this contract is signed, this says if we ever do a deal, it'll be against the backdrop of these provisions. Okay, so that's the first document we're negotiating, the EEI master agreement. We're negotiating the amendments to that. The second thing that we're negotiating is the confirmation letter. And, yes, sir.
Before you go to the second, can I just ask a question on the first? So, do we negotiate, people can hear me.
I can hear
Do we negotiate a master agreement with each of these bidders, or only with the one that we end up selecting?
This is an excellent point, and this is something that is very important to cover. So one way that you could run the process, not the way that I would recommend it, but one way is to say, who has the best price? And so you have the lowest price, and then we spend a month negotiating this, and by the time we get to the end of it, we sign the contract. But we don't really know what the other 2 bidders would have agreed to in the contract or what concessions they may have required or may not have required. So the approach that we are doing, and this is the same approach that Sonoma did, and I helped Sonoma do their procurement, and the same approach that the city of Lancaster did, and I helped them with their procurement, is you negotiate each of these agreements with each of the suppliers until you get down to there are no further changes on either side. Both parties are willing to execute. And it's only at the moment that you are prepared to sign and be legally bound under the agreement that they can give you final pricing.
So just to follow up,
So yes, it's
we
3
put in
parallel
place-
negotiations.
We effectively put in place, at least through negotiations, a master agreement with each of the potential suppliers, and then we can fill it in with the content of what we're going to purchase and sign it or not sign it. But
Yes.
But theoretically, is it true that we could sign a master agreement before we decide what we're going to buy?
You can, and yes, and it is common practice for utilities and CCAs and energy traders to have master agreements with lots of counterparties. And so you have a contract in place, and then if you, you need 1 month's worth of energy, you need 5% more, you can send out an RFP, you get written proposals, and if you and I already have a contract in place, now we're just talking about price, terms, quantity, and delivery point. And so, yeah, this agreement is in fact so streamlined that it is set up that once it's in place, that sophisticated counterparties, they do all their transactions verbally. Multi-year contracts, multi-million-dollar transactions verbally, and it's legally binding. That's one thing we amend in this agreement. It has to be in writing. But it is, but it is set up to be seamless like that, so once it's in place, because, electricity by its nature, there are, not only long-term transactions, like we're talking about 3-4 years, but 1 month, 1 day, 2 hours tomorrow, and so you don't want to spend a bunch of time negotiating that.
One question.
Yes, sir.
Now, the way I understand that this master agreement, if it was a PG&E signing a master contract, that would be under the guidance or approval or review of PUC because of what they are doing. But, and that's a question I'm asking you, but as a CCA, we, the board, and you, the experts, can decide how we want to sign a master contract without need for review by PUC, am I right?
Yes. Now, you have other compliance obligations related to renewable energy and other filings. But the agreement itself is not subject to the PUC's approval. So first document, the master agreement. We're making amendments to that to accommodate a transaction. Second document in your packet or in there would be what we call the confirmation letter. And that describes the specific terms of the transaction. So there are exhibits at the end that say X amount of energy at Y price, and this much renewable energy that qualifies for Category 1 renewables, and this much renewable energy that qualifies for Category 2, and this much energy, and at each different prices, carbon-free energy. And then there'll be a subsequent procurement for resource adequacy. And then there are specific details that relate to that transaction. There's an exhibit to that, which we're also negotiating, that lays out the responsibilities for the winning bidder to schedule all this energy. Because you have to get it here. It's got to be metered. It has to be settled up with the California ISO. There has to be settlements with the California Independent System Operator. Try to avoid acronyms with the general audience. And so in the confirmation, there is the deal-specific terms that are just for that time period and the information about the scheduling. Under the default provisions here for payment and financing, it's actually not set up in a way that would work with the CCA. There's a concept in here of margining and collateral thresholds, and this is a contract for fixed prices, and that's how you can set your rates based on fixed prices. But if the market moves up or moves down based on those prices, under the default provisions here, you would need to post additional collateral on a very short timeline. So those are other things that we're amending. Because those provisions we want to amend, the sellers need to have some assurances that they're going to get paid. Because at the same time that they enter into the contract to sell electricity to Peninsula Clean Energy, they are also entering into contracts upstream to lock in prices for the energy that they're buying. That's hedging. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the concept. And so they're committed on those contracts. We're committed to them. If we default, that's trouble for them. So they need to be sure that they're going to get paid. And one option would be to just put the county taxpayers and the taxpayers of the cities and just make it a general obligation. That wouldn't be acceptable to this group either, I don't think. So because of that, we have an alternate structure, and that's why we're using the lockbox. Let me stop at this point. Are there any questions so far? Okay. Yes, sir.
I only come to these meetings curious about the term lockbox structure.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Okay, thank you. So what the lockbox is. Okay. I'll let David be the traffic cop on the questions. So, lockbox, yes, that's jargon. What do we mean by lockbox? A lockbox is a bank account. It's a bank account. Yep. So the lockbox is a bank account that is established at a bank. There's also the idea of a collateral agent, and I'll talk about that in a second. But so this bank account is the account where the revenues from PG&E, from all of the customers of your CCA, so PG&E handles the billing, and so the revenues go to PG&E, and PG&E will wire those to the bank account that you designate. And so the bank account that you designate, and this is all documented in the security documents, that bank account will be set up, and the reason it's called lockbox is that the idea is that the CCA doesn't have access to the funds, that there is a collateral agent that administers the money. And the collateral agent, and we're working right now with Wilmington Trust, which is a very well-known, very large bank that handles this sort of thing. But what they do is each month, they will take a look at the money in the account, they will look at the invoices that are payable to the power sellers, and they will pay the energy sellers, and then the remaining revenues will be then dispersed out to the CCA. And so that's how the sellers can get security and become comfortable with this arrangement, in that they have a first priority secured lien on these revenues. And so this structure is what we are providing to them in lieu of the taxpayers having primary liability for this, or having, tens of millions of dollars available for margining. This structure of having the lockbox is what the City of Lancaster has done, it's what Sonoma Clean Power has done, and it's what Marin Clean Energy has done as well.
Question, would the seller's invoices be reviewed before they get approved by the agent, by this board, or somebody from CCA?
Excellent question. Yes. Yes, they will be reviewed, and the way that it works is that so you have, let's use October. We're planning to start energy deliveries October 1st. At the end of October, so in November, the seller will calculate the invoice for the October deliveries. Under the agreement, I think they have good faith efforts to send us the invoice by the middle of the month. It's actually not payable until the 25th day of the next month. And we all know that the month after November is December, and December 25th is a special day. It's not a business day, so we actually wouldn't pay it on that. We'd pay it on the next business day. They send the invoices to the CCA, and the CCA reviews it. We create what's called a distribution certificate. We send it to them and say, this is what we are proposing to ask the collateral agent to distribute. They have a couple of days to review it, object to it if there's a disagreement. We work it out, and then Peninsula Clean Energy gives the distribution certificate to the collateral agent, and then the collateral agent makes the payment. And if there was a dispute, well, then we'd look at the dispute resolution provisions in the contract and work that out. So the blocked account is a bank account, and the account is set up legally. The way it's set up is that the collateral agent is the secured party, and they are acting on behalf of the secured parties, the PPA providers. Yes, sir. And you had a question. Actually, I think you had. This is something that we are negotiating, and I don't think it's letting the cat out of the bag to say that we are talking about a reserve amount. And we have proposed one, and that's still in negotiation.
So this looks like, sounds like an escrow account like you would in going to get a loan for your house. You have an intermediary that handles the funds.
No. Sorry to interrupt you. So in fact, there's been some confusion among different folks. So we're talking to a couple of banks for a couple of different roles. We're talking to Barclays for funding to put some money into that blocked account so that there is some cash flow to handle in the early period, in the startup period. The revenues that are coming in aren't going to line up with the expenses that are going out. So it improves the cash flow. It also provides some collateral to put in there, and it also provides a source of liquidity if you need it. So that's with Barclays. We have Wilmington Trust, which would be the bank that would hold the blocked account. And then we have Wilmington acting in a different capacity as the collateral agent. And so just like the escrow agent, it's similar. It's money is in an account, and once it goes into the account, there's someone with instructions, and the money is only dispersed based on those written instructions. And so those written instructions are in our in the packet. It's called the Intercreditor and Collateral Agency Agreement.
The follow-up question, therefore, is without giving out a negotiating position, what is the typical rate that you would charge for the service? So I don't have the exact numbers on it, but it is a relatively small amount, and I wouldn't want to be held to it, but I think it's in the range of maybe $5,000 or $10,000 a month, and that may be too high.
That's about right.
Okay, thank you. So $5,000 to $10,000 a month to be handling disbursement of $6 million of payments each month, and so it's a good value. Were there any other questions? I saw. Yes. All right. So we have our lockbox. This slide talks about the flow of the funds. We could walk through this real quick. This was what we proposed initially to the bidders, and it's still in negotiation. But the key takeaway here is that if I might approach the door. The PPA providers get paid before you. That they would be paid, the way this is set up, they would be paid the current charges that are currently owed. The supplemental payments, the idea is make up payments, or maybe you had 5 different parties who were using this blocked account, and this one is confusing. If you had multiple parties and say one of those parties defaulted under the contract and terminated it, well, their money is still in here, and it would be settled up as a supplemental payment. And so those payments are made, then the collateral agent, the bank, will get their $5,000 to $10,000, and then the remaining balance is then sent into probably your operating account. So this is the structure, and this is how the PPA providers can get comfortable with sort of a no money down, even though you're signing a $200 million contract. One improvement that we have made to this model, the first CCAs had a lockbox for the seller. So they had a lockbox, and the seller who won their RFP was the one who administered the bank account and who directed all the payments. And that model worked very well to get them launched. But then when they wanted to enter into a new contract with a different company to buy electricity, they'd already played their card. And so they didn't have another option. So with the city of Lancaster, I came up with this idea. Why don't, in other finance settings, there are multiple creditors sharing a blocked account. Why couldn't we do it in the CCA context? And there was wailing and gnashing of teeth and pulling on the clothes of the energy providers. They don't like this idea. But once it's in place, then the CCA can use that card every time, and when you want to enter into another contract, you can just use this, and you don't have to have the taxpayers or the cash on hand. And one thing that I'm sure you're seeing in an RFP, if you have lots of bidders, that's how you get the best price. And so if you go with a lockbox and have one seller, now you have a market of one company, and that's a monopoly, and that's kind of what you were trying to get away from. So where we are at in the negotiations, if it's fair to give an update, is I think we are 2/3 of the way through the process. We have had, with respect to this agreement and the other agreements, we've had 2 rounds of exchanging, changes to the agreements. We put out our pro formas. They made markups. We had negotiation calls. We made changes, sent those out. We've had follow-up phone calls. This week, I'm drafting changes. PCE staff is reviewing them. Next week, the documents go back out to the counterparties. And with each round, we're getting to a smaller and smaller set of issues, and the scale of those issues is also getting smaller and smaller. And just to kind of go back to the beginning, all of those things have to be agreed upon before you can get final pricing. Once you have final pricing, then you can just pick the company that has the best credit package, the best pricing, and immediately sign the contracts, set your rates, subject to approval of the board, of course.
So it's probably questions.
Yes.
One question. Regarding the reserve fund of CCA.
Yes.
There might be excess cash than our expenses, or we might like to maintain certain reserve fund. Is that at the lockbox bank, or is that at our Barclay bank, or?
So Barclay is just the bank loaning you money. At the bank that is holding the blocked account, that is where the reserve amount would sit. And so what we could have put up here in the waterfall is that payments to the PPA providers, payment to the collateral agent, and provided there's a reserve amount, or after subtracting enough for the reserve amount, any excess is then distributed to the
I
CCA.
think there's actually a completely understanding or misunderstanding. He wasn't referring to the reserves that need to be maintained in order to make everybody happy.
Oh.
He's talking about the money that we are going to retain as a reserve that
Ah.
we use to reduce prices or pay for things or stabilize
Yeah.
prices.
This is a Mike question. It's not a legal question. It's where do you want to put the money?
That's wherever we want to, but
Yeah. So, yeah, the balance after all the power purchase providers are paid, and then the collateral agent will go into the PCEA operating account. And then I think it'd be a decision from the board or by Jan on, how much do you feel you need to keep in reserve in your operating account? Because you'll be using that operating account to be paying bills throughout the year. But that's a decision that I think the board will make, but that is the idea. The reserves for the PCE's funds will be kept in that operating account.
And so those amounts, just to clarify, maybe only for myself, but those reserve amounts, that's at your discretion.
Correct.
You're not contractually required. That's just good business management, how you want to do that. Yeah. Thank you, Fred.
Daniel?
What are after the contract's all negotiated, what are the variables that will decide the actual selection? Obviously, there's price and creditworthiness, presumably, of the provider. Are there others that are typically considered by CCAs, such as those that might want to exceed the renewable requirement, or other variables, pieces that might be moving around?
Well, one thing I would say that would be a criteria would be the reputation of the seller. But fortunately, the 3 shortlisted companies you have all have stellar reputations and deep experience. You have a very great shortlist. So I think as far as that goes, they're all on comparable footing. As far as the renewable energy component of it, that's what you negotiate that you're buying from them, and they're happy to sell you as much of it as you'd like to buy. So in that way, it's the same. Where there may be differences between us, pencils down, is that in the negotiation of the security documents, that some of them may insist on a more stringent requirement. For example, one might say, I want X dollars as a reserve in the locked account, and another company might say, we want this much in the locked account. Now, if the company that wants more, which you would have to borrow, has a lower price, then you're going to have to weigh those things. And those are the types of decisions you might be asked to make, is to make that. You will also have a choice between the companies of their credit rating. They all have investment grade credit ratings. And we also, the credit proposals that we are negotiating reflect that. So the higher the credit rating, the less that we are asking for in terms of collateral. And if that credit rating comes down, they have an obligation under the contract to provide more collateral. So we have, the best we can, have tried to, trying to think of the right verb, normalized or evened out the disparities in their credit rating based on the collateral that we're asking them to provide.
Hi, Jeff.
So their collateral will sit, I suppose, in Jan's desk. So good question about the collateral. So here is what the collateral, yeah. So here is what we are going out there with. Okay, if the counterparty that is signing the contract, if the company that is signing the contract has a credit rating, so if they are, you can look at the New York Stock Exchange and they have, a triple B plus or A credit rating, then they don't need to provide a parent guarantee, a letter of guarantee. One of the bidders, the company is well-known and very experienced, but they do not have a credit rating, but they have a parent corporation that has tens of billions of dollars of market value, and that parent will back up the obligation. So in some cases, we'll have a parent guarantee or a rated entity. So that's one. A second, and in my opinion, the most important part of the credit package is something we call the independent amount. And the independent amount is a letter of credit from the seller of an amount based upon their credit rating that they will just provide. And when I was joking and saying it'll live in Jan's desk, that letter of credit will, it will be a physical document that you will have. If there is a default under the agreement, you will be entitled under the contract to walk down to that bank and to cash in that letter of credit and have all of that money against any money that they would owe you. It doesn't mean you get to keep it, but you have that. This is not something that the sellers typically give up in these types of transactions because they say, hey, I have a triple B plus credit rating. I don't need a letter of credit. But we've explained to them, and they understand CCAs are in a slightly different position. We don't have power plants. We don't have a big portfolio of assets. And if they were to default, we would want the ability to put our hands on a large amount of cash today. And so that's, if they need to put it in their price, put it in your price. But that's the structure. And so that's also similar to the structure of the other CCAs. So we have those two things. We have cross-default provisions. So if they miss a bond payment, if they miss important financing payments going to default, that is an event of default under our agreement unless they provide additional collateral. We have downgrade provisions. So if we are relying upon someone's credit rating and that credit rating starts to go this way, they have to give us more collateral or that's a default under the agreement. We also have another provision which is still in negotiation, is for what is called credit assurances. And that means even if the credit ratings haven't changed, If there is something else out there that is making us uncertain about their ability to perform, we can ask for more collateral. Maybe criminal investigation, or the CEO leaves the country under suspicious circumstances and they're not returning our phone calls, something like that maybe, that hasn't been picked up in the press. And then there's another provision related to collateral. It's complex. We could talk about it for 30 minutes, but it's called collateral threshold. And if their credit rating drops just a notch or two, depending on where market prices move, remember I mentioned the margining, we would have the right to ask them to post additional collateral. So that's our package. That's all of the protections we have for the CCA. And like I was saying, about 2/3 of the way there in negotiating that.
Lori?
Yes, ma'am.
So in the other CCAs that you've worked on, have there been events of default, and what have the CCAs done?
Fingers crossed, there have been no defaults. In part, the large suppliers, if you look at Sonoma, their main supplier and their scheduling coordinator is Constellation Energy, which is Exelon. They probably have market value of $30 billion. It's a pretty reputable company. Marin has Shell Energy North America. They have something like $120 billion of market capitalization. They're a large company. City of Lancaster has Direct Energy. Direct Energy's parent corporation is large and has an A- credit rating. So their main providers are, very, very, very solid. So we haven't had to cross that bridge, but if we did, we're armed to the teeth. We've got so many different remedies and options there.
Steve, how do these negotiations compare with your prior experiences in that, we're a big CCE, we're having a large initial launch compared to others. Obviously, you've been doing it for a number of years. I mean, how is this all evolving, or are our agreements going to look kind of what happened with Lancaster?
The one joke I have is that each time we do this, we get a little bit smarter. Unfortunately, so do they. But the agreements get better each time. And next year, when we do a procurement, they will be a little bit better. As far at the 10,000-foot level, it looks a lot like Lancaster. I think maybe that's what you're asking. As far as the process is getting more efficient. It's just going from, and I'm not. It has nothing to do with me, but there is something to be said for the same players there. And so between Constellation and Lancaster, it's similar companies, similar entities. They know each other, and it's working faster. So. David, as painful as this has been, it's actually going much more quickly and much more smoothly than before at each time. Something else to mention, and this might be a point that's. Hello, Sean. Come on in.
Sorry.
One thing to keep in mind is that for the next procurement, your security documents in the lockbox, that's all in place. So for the next company that wants to sign a power purchase agreement with Peninsula Clean Energy, you'll negotiate the power purchase agreement, and for the security documents, there's a one-page document, they'll sign that, and then they're a party to the lockbox. So you won't have to go through and renegotiate all of those things. That structure's in place. And as far as the EEI master agreement, if you have that in place with whoever's the seller under phase one, if they win in phase two, you're just going to negotiate a confirmation, a few pages of contracts. So that will be simpler. One hypothetical would be in phase two, actually one of the bidders who didn't win in phase one wins. Well, you've already negotiated this agreement to execution with them, change the dates and sign that. And so there's a lot of legal lifting right now to get these things in place. But once you have this, it will get much easier for you. And after these procurements, it would probably make sense to get EEIs in place with other large reputable energy companies and do small transactions with them just to have the relationships and do that. And for those agreements, you start right from your form. You've got a form that's been developed and customized and approved internally. So.
I have a question. It's probably not for you, Mr. Hall. I just kind of want to revisit some of the basis of what we're talking about with looking for power, which is I know that are probably in the RFP earlier. I remember that there was discussion about we're going to purchase no unbundled RECs. Is that still the case in what we're negotiating for?
That's right.
Okay. And are we looking for energy generated in California?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a mix.
I just want to make sure that things haven't fallen off.
But David, you may want to get into that a little bit more. I mean, there may be, it's not all from California.
Could be Pacific Northwest.
And I think what you might have been alluding to is the RFP. And what the RFP did was it indicated that we had a preference for energy that was sourced first, I believe regionally, and then in the state of California. That was a preference. And that would be something that the proposers knew when they proposed. And it would be something that the committee would look at when it was evaluated. And now we're negotiating the agreements. Is that responsive?
Somewhat, except it just speaks in generalities.
It does.
Because it hasn't been decided.
Okay. Okay, so we can't really, that's part
Yep.
of the confidential negotiations.
Okay. But I think it was said, so I think there's no harm in me repeating it, that we are not negotiating with any parties right now for unbundled RECs, which are also called portfolio category 3. That's not a product that we're negotiating on. Yes, sir.
Absolutely. So you can do it now, and that's great. And if you don't want to do it now, you can do it sometime in the next 2 weeks. The hope is that you would do it prior to the meeting on the 23rd, because at that point, everything's going to be basically negotiated. And obviously, you aren't required to approve what was negotiated, but it would be very difficult for us at that point to make changes. So this is a great time to ask
So you
questions.
actually, there's amendment to page 38, section 10.6 governing law.
Yes.
Originally, it was said that all parties waive with respect to right to any jury trial with respect to invocation right in some blah, blah, blah. Agreement. And then it's changed to really wordy, legalistic. So I want to know, the bottom line is, we can go to trial, we have the options to go to arbitration.
So there's different things in different agreements. I want to say in all of the banking agreements, we're waiving the right to jury trial. They would not. There was discussion around that subject, but there was no other option. It was a deal breaker for the banks. For the power companies, where are we right now?
It's similar. It's pretty industry standard to waive jury trial. Also, with respect to renewable energy, there are certain required provisions that are supposed to be in California law, or under California law, that are supposed to be in renewable energy contracts that pass CPUC muster. And in there is a provision of California law and waiving jury trial. So in isolation, you might prefer to, was your question more about arbitration? Like, is that a possibility?
Yeah.
Under these agreements, you're not required to go to arbitration.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out what our liabilities are.
So that's, so for liabilities, what we have tied everything to is to the blocked account. So if there is a default under this agreement, then the PPA providers, their recourse is to that bank account and to the money into the bank account. If you look in the same agreement, there's an important provision on page page 1649, which says, no recourse to the constituent members of Party B, and Peninsula Clean Energy is Party B. So in terms of liability, the county, the cities, they're not exposed to any liability under this, per this language. Right, that,
And this
yeah,
language.
the sellers need to look to something, and so, yeah.
And this is
Bless you.
actually, I mean, what you're asking about is what I spoke about when I came to your various city councils. And when I explained that one of the things that we would do when we entered into these power purchase agreements is I would ensure that there would be a provision that made very clear that any liability exposure would be held by the JPA and the cities would be protected. It's not much, but this one paragraph is what does it. And Steve and I have had a bunch of conversation about it.
Can you reference that paragraph?
Yes, it's paragraph 49 on page 16 of the EEI master. And there's another provision somewhere else as well, that they're remembering.
No, you're remembering correctly, in Schedule M of the same agreement. So, you know, these are examples of amendments we're making to the industry standard agreement. The provision I think you're referring to, David, is, let me find the right. If you look on page 43 of the same agreement, it's in what's called Schedule M, and if you look at the amendment to section 10.2, subpart 5, it says Party B, again, that's Peninsula Clean Energy, their obligation to make payments with respect to the master agreement and each transaction are to be made solely from the special fund. If you go to the definition of special fund, it's the lockbox.
Rick had a question.
Yeah, so is it our strategy to go through the negotiations with each of the recipients of the RFP and actually put the master agreement in place rather than just wait and then at the end put it in place with one party? I'll say, I like that strategy. If we have a master agreement, we're not actually committed to anything. We're just defining
Yep.
the terms and conditions of a purchase if and when we choose to select a purchase. But if we put in place multiple master agreements, then it seems to me that we create the environment for competition that we desire with the RFP. And in fact, we've paid council to go through the effort to negotiate out all the terms in each of these master agreements. So if we don't have any obligation, any risk, I don't see any reason not to put them in place and then to basically utilize them as an asset going forward.
You and I are reading from the same page. That is exactly what I would recommend, and that's what I've tried to do before. Unfortunately, like a lot of things in life, it takes two to dance. And on the day when you choose one happy winner who's just signing a $200 million contract and the other two didn't win, you say, but for your consolation prize, like you to sign this agreement.
Hold on, but they know this is just phase one. And
That's right,
they know
that's right, that's
phase
right,
is coming.
yeah. So in my experience, you can ask, and sometimes they do, and other times they say, you know what, let's just, we're a little demoralized right now. Let's wait till we have a live transaction, and then we'll revisit this. So this, I always ask this, and no one seems to bite.
Lori?
But let me just finish up. But having said that, then in phase two, we would start from right where we left off. So it's not like you would reset all the contract provisions.
There's an incentive for them to do it.
Yeah.
Because it's in place, so
Yeah,
in a way, they
Negotiated it, it's all, yeah, that's a good point.
in a way,
Yeah, that's right, that's right.
So once the agreement is signed, would the document become public and would the other banks be able to see what those terms are?
The other parties will, so this is a very important and detailed point, is the general terms of the document would be, the pricing would be a separate page, a separate exhibit, and would not be made publicly available just on your website. And that's kind of consistent with the terms of the industry and our confidentiality provisions and our understanding of the California Public Records Act. If someone wanted to submit a Freedom of Information Act request and go down that road, more power to them, and everyone will comply with that according to law. By the time they get it weeks later, or however long it takes, that pricing information isn't very valuable then. It's kind of like knowing what a stock price was 3 months ago.
And that's actually one of the things we've been talking about this week, is we've been working on a provision that basically allows, because they're going to expect it, that allows the ESPs, the energy service providers, to designate certain material as confidential. We fully expect that they will designate their pricing as confidential, but we have shifted to them, or we're in the process of working to shift to them the responsibility to protect their information. So
Yep.
We basically, in the event that there is a request, and I suspect there won't be, because I think folks recognize that this stuff is confidential, but if there is, and if the ESPs want to protect it, which presumably they will, it will be their responsibility to do it.
And I just wanted to add that this is one of the sticky points about confidentiality that makes it difficult for us to trace PCEA calculations of PG&E, because there are a number of contracts, they are confidential, and we can't see them. And that has been a lot of public cry about it, that we would like to see details, but under that
But
provision.
but the point was made that this information becomes stale pretty quickly. So wouldn't most of these PG&E, wouldn't most of that information be
Well, that's the point I'm
stale?
trying to make, is that PG&E is hiding behind that, even the information they should share with us, in order not to divulge the detail. Actually, that's the understanding.
You're saying that they're waving their hands and saying it's confidential, we couldn't possibly share this with you? Yeah, it's stale, it's old, and now you're just trying to do cost accounting. I don't know why they wouldn't provide it.
So if there aren't any other questions.
Are there other questions, though?
I just want to observe that what the plan is for the 23rd, and you've heard what are being negotiated right now are basically the equivalent of, I'm going to say 12 and a half separate documents. 4 of the documents are really being negotiated. The 5th one, the block account agreement, is being negotiated, but to a lesser extent, there's less interest in it. But there are lots of different versions. And so when we present an agreement for approval to you in 2 weeks, we are going to present to you, one version of each set of documents. We're not going to present to you 15 separate documents. And what we're going to be asking you to do is we're going to be asking you to authorize your CEO, Ms. Pepper, and myself to execute the agreement based on the pricing that we get the following week. And we're doing that. Wow, I have more power than I thought. We're doing that for 2 reasons. I mean, one is if we were to provide all of the documents to you, it would be problematic. One, because the proposers would probably be able to figure out who the other proposers are, which would allow for collusion. In addition, to the extent that we had negotiated more favorable terms as to one ESP than as to the other, that could cause problems as well, because although we will have authority to execute them, they will not have executed them yet, and they could always ask for additional changes. And then finally, and I think that Steve either said this or alluded to it, is we got pricing as part of the RFP process, but it's not guaranteed pricing. We aren't going to know what the actual prices are until we are ready to sign these agreements. We tell them we're ready to sign the agreements, and then they are going to tell us what their prices are, and we're going to have an hour or two to decide whether or not which one of the providers are to be selected. So what we're going to ask you to do is basically approve a form of agreement very similar to the ones that we have provided to you today, but not identical. And this is the process it's the only process that we can use. So that's why it's extremely important, to the extent that you have any concerns about anything you see in these agreements, and I recognize they're very complex, or you simply don't understand what they mean and you want to understand what they mean better, please feel free to reach out to me, ask me questions, express your concerns, do it over the next, week and a half. Let me know. I will be responsive. I'll work with Steve, and we'll make sure that we remedy the things that you're concerned about or get you the answers that you need. And on the 23rd, we will ask you to give Jan the authorization to execute the agreement. So that's the process. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate your time.
David.
And I think there may need to be public
I think we
comment.
may have a couple of questions on the process. I had one on, on the pricing. I mean, we won't know the pricing until, as you say, the day it's offered.
Yes.
But but from the board's perspective, I would think we might want to have, a not to exceed amount or something, or, I mean.
Oh, for sure. Yes.
Tell us how that's going to be set up, so we know roughly how much money is going out the door.
So
what we're going to get for it.
So I believe that the way, I wish that PEA was here, and I don't know whether you want to comment on that, Steve?
So I think I saw on Jan's notes that there was a comment about asking the bidders to refresh their pricing. And so the pricing is what's called indicative, which means not binding, but they do have an interest in giving a competitive price because they know you're getting prices from the other bidders. So one idea would be to ask for the bidders to refresh their pricing, and that, it's an opportunity to do a kind of a reality check of, at that price level, can we hit our rate goals and our rate targets?
Yeah, and that's going to happen as part of the rate setting, and that's what you're going to see on the 23rd. And so, yes, and I'm going from what my basic understanding, so please don't hold me to it. But what I think that what we're going to ask you to do is give us parameters of about this amount less than PG&E as a percentage, and about this much, reserve, something around the goals that you're setting in the context of the rate setting. So that's going to be our bookends, and how I write that into the resolution, I think, is going to depend on conversations with PEA and conversations that we have leading up to the meeting on the 23rd. But yes, we're definitely going to have parameters. We have to meet the goals of the rate setting in the context of the pricing. And yes, PEA is going to get refreshed pricing prior to presenting to you on rates on the 23rd, is my understanding. Is that responsive?
That helps.
Okay.
Can I add one other thing?
There were some other questions, though. I think Nick had one.
Dave, could I follow up on just one point there? I've seen this multiple times in negotiations, that when the board authorizes contracts at a certain price point, and then you get to the day of, and they have their pricing, and if they know that there is a do not to exceed amount, they know that it puts downward pressure on their pricing, because they know that if the price is above what the board has approved, that there's no deal that morning, that the only way it could happen is that they have to be the lowest price among the bidders, and we go back to the board. And so that.
But does it also ensure that they're going to come in just below?
Yeah, I just was thinking that too.
Well, this is part of the dynamic of it, but when you have more than one bidder, then it's game theory, right? It's each one of them saying, well, if the others, or prisoner's dilemma, it's all of that. And so they want to win. Ultimately, they want to win. And the pricing that they develop for this is ultimately tied to forward models and gas prices. And it's very, and then there's kind of a little bit of a judgment on that. But so that's where having the robust competition helps you with the price.
Question. I understand the intricacies and the pricing, competition and gaming that might happen. But on the other hand, I think board is responsible to make sure that our transactions are such that we are financially stable, et cetera, et cetera. would we have a closed session or a subcommittee of the board in that process involved so that we all feel comfortable about it? Not that I don't feel comfortable with all you working under the guidelines, but we can only provide guidelines which will be broad enough to give you some room to actually do the negotiation.
So, there's no mechanism under the Brown Act for a closed session in this context. Now, if the board were to believe that having board members participate was important, and if it was less than a majority of the board, and if it was a group not selected by the board, then that's something that we could do. But if it were a Brown Act entity, which would be the case if the board created it, or if it was a majority of the board, that would be a violation of the Brown Act. So I hear what you're saying. Let me think about how I can effectuate it. But it, although logically you would think it'd be easy, it's not.
Well, I'll leave it to you.
I appreciate, but I hear what you're saying, and I will do my best.
I think Rick had a follow-up, maybe we could get that.
Follow up to what I was asking before. And, you know, we're looking at this both for the impact at phase one, which we're dealing with right now, but we're also cognizant that we're going to be following this on with phase 2 and 3.
Right.
And I understood from your comments before that actually the way we got into it, I guess from the RFP probably, was we're going to explore these issues and we're going to select one. So give us your best shot. And so my question is, could we go into this, maybe it's too late now, but maybe we can think about it for phase 2. Could we have gone into it with the RFP, said, we're going to negotiate and enter into a master agreement with everyone that we're able to successfully negotiate with that responds to the RFP. And then we will select one of those of you that enter into the master agreement to supply the energy in response to this RFP. And those that we don't supply will look to as possible suppliers when we look for additional energy. And then you wouldn't have had the issue where somebody's disappointed because it was the expectation in the RFP that they'd be negotiated and entering into a master agreement. Has that been done previously? And if not, could it be?
Not in that way. You might have a second career in this. That's a good idea, and subject to what Jan or David might say.
It would be very expensive from a legal fee standpoint.
Negotiating it right now?
I think what he's saying is that we tell them that once we get to the point where we're ready for pricing, go ahead and sign the masters and send them over. And then all we're signing is the confirmation with the winner.
I think we've done the work.
I-
Unless I'm missing.
Yeah, I thought,
MCE did.
Yeah,
I
I
thought
think that
that,
I think there's no harm in asking them and just saying, you know, we have a very concerned board member who suggested this, and we think it's a terrific idea, and any objections?
And yeah, try it this time.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work this time, but I think we could set the expectation the next time.
Sure.
Yep.
I think it's in our interest to have these things ready to go.
Absolutely it is. And the reason I was, you know, the whole thing of, you know, it takes two to dance is that it's just kind of a sense of inertia on the side of the parties that didn't win. There's no transaction, and they're immediately off to the next deal, and they don't want to spend 5 more minutes on a losing deal. But,
Which is why it's good to set it up.
yeah. So, Sean, did you want to add anything about
No,
that?
what you described is what Marine Clean Energy did in its first
In
transaction.
their first one?
Wisha.
Yep.
Daniel,
In addition to absolving the cities of any liability, does the contract absolve officers and directors of any liability? And if not, can we make sure that language is clear?
Well, we'll have insurance for that. I mean, we could,
We
sure.
suggest it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great idea.
Yep.
we'll keep you out of that lockbox, Daniel.
Yeah, you know, the concept is there in the negative in saying that their sole recourse is to the lockbox. It kind of implies that those are your only options.
We can
but-
certainly ask to make it explicit.
Yeah,
Of all the
yep,
things they're
that's right.
objecting to, they'll probably, well, they object to a lot of things, so we'll see. But we can certainly ask, and it's a reasonable request, and it's a good one. Anything else? Do you want to turn it over to the public, Supervisor?
Are there any speakers from the public on this matter? I think, Jan, I know you had your hand up at one point.
Oh, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was something like, so why don't you come back to me? I don't wanna-
And you can always provide your question to me later, and I'll do my best to answer it.
Thank you.
All right, well,
Well, we have another one. Carl had a question.
Carl Van Orsdal. As a former energy risk manager for the city of Palo Alto, I would definitely recommend you have multiple master agreements set up immediately in case of a default situation, so that you can then immediately go out and purchase other power supplies without going through the negotiation process. I think the second thing is, all EEI agreements use Moody's or Standard & Poor's ratings. I think most large utilities and certainly financial institutions use a finer sensitivity analysis, such as a expected default rate, as we saw during the financial crisis and during the 2000 energy crisis. Moody's and Standard & Poor's in their standard rating is way behind the actual credit situation, so I would certainly recommend that you institute, as you do your credit monitoring, something that's a little bit finer tuned than just the standard ratings. And then the third question I have is the termination arrangements, whether it's one-way or two-way termination regarding, for example, mark-to-market values, which is, of course, something that impacted a lot of municipal utilities in the 2000 energy crisis.
So those are three excellent comments and questions. So the first one, that was Rick's comment about having other master agreements in place. And yes, it's exactly for that reason, so that on short notice you can get energy from other suppliers and you don't have to spend a week or two negotiating general terms and conditions. For anybody who's interested in what happens if on Tuesday your energy supplier stops sending you energy, the lights stay on. California ISO would provide that. It's financial at that point, but that's an excellent point. Your second question, I remember the one-way termination.
It was more a comment on rating.
Oh, on the rating, okay. So, anybody who's seen the movie The Big Short? It tells that story exactly. And so that's the reason why when I talked about the credit package, for me, just between us, the whole idea of the credit ratings, I have no confidence in the credit rating agencies. And so we have the standard provisions in there that if their ratings do go down, we get more collateral. At some point, they have to post a lot more collateral. We have all of that in there. But we also have credit assurances provision, which is in the EI 8.1 and 8.2b, which just allows us, in our commercially reasonable judgment, if we are concerned, we can ask for performance assurance. They have 3 business days to provide it. If they don't, and we believe that they should, that's an event of default right there. So, and if it's an event of default, then the independent amount that we have, the letter of credit that we have from each of them, we're entitled to walk down to the bank and cash that and put that in our pocket. And so I'm with you 100% on that I don't solely rely upon the credit rating agencies. Just I don't think they do a good job and maybe are not as independent as they should be. The third point, this gentleman's clearly an industry, he's a ringer, because he knew a very important issue, but it's a detailed contract question, and it's a little bit complex. The way that the EEI master agreement is set up with the default provisions, if you don't change the words, the way that the mechanism works is that if there is a contract termination, you don't look at who's at fault. So one party files for bankruptcy, the other party calculates whether the market price is higher or lower than the contract price. And what that means is somebody is in the money and somebody is out of the money. And you're not looking at fault. And so then And then based upon that, whoever is in the money gets a payment. And what that creates is a circumstance where you can have a company file, so we sign up with a great energy supplier and they file for bankruptcy next year, and then we terminate the contract and they send us an invoice for $110 million. Like, wait a minute, you filed for bankruptcy and we terminated. Why do we owe you $110 million? And by the way, we're trying to find another energy supplier. We're trying to, keep our CCA going. That circumstance, which I think you might be alluding to, that actually happened to Snohomish County PUD up in Washington State with Enron when Enron filed for bankruptcy. They had that default provision. They had not amended it in the contract. And when Enron filed for bankruptcy and Snohomish terminated the contract, Enron invoiced them for $110 million, which they were entitled to do under the contract. 10 years of litigation ensued, and Snohomish did write a check at the end. We don't have that. We've got a different provision. Our provision says that if there is a termination and there is a mark-to-market value, that the defaulting party, they lose that, they forfeit it. And so that's a provision that the energy suppliers, that's not their preference, but for most of them, it's more of a tier 2 issue. And if it comes down to getting a deal or not getting a deal, at the end of the day, that's one that they will usually negotiate on. But you have to know to ask for it, and if you don't ask for it, then it's just buried in the boilerplate in a bunch of defined terms nobody understands. So, good point. Very good question.
All right, good questions. Any further questions or comments? I think that was very helpful. And as David mentioned, he'll be very responsive if people want to call him with further follow-up questions. Thanks. We did have a meeting of the Citizen Advisory Committee, and Kristen's going to give us a report on that.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Kirsten Pringle, and I work for the county's Office of Sustainability. On June 2nd, your Citizens Advisory Committee held a regular meeting, and I just wanted to give you some report outs from that meeting. There was a discussion on rate setting, and several CAC members suggested that the rate comparison with PG&E should be as clear as possible. Especially there's some confusion of whether the percent difference is percent over the total bill or just on the generation side of the bill. And some members advised that we might want to be clear about that. Several CAC members made comments on the time of use rates. One member made a comment on certain rates, such as the E6 for solar customers becoming obsolete, and advised your board to be aware of that. And one member noted that currently customers with low income discounts are not eligible for the time of use rates for electric vehicles. A CAC member suggested making electric vehicle rates available for individuals who would like to switch out their natural gas appliances with electric appliances. And several CAC members made comments asking about the vintaging of the PCEA because it is changing and how that might affect rates between phase 1 and 2 customers and phase 3 of customers. There was also discussion on marketing, and the big takeaways for that is that several CAC members suggested providing draft email blasts to partner agencies, which we're working on with Circle Point. And several CAC members suggested changing the color scheme for the advertising collateral. And finally, several CAC members asked about the criteria being used to evaluate the ESPs, which also came up tonight. So, thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. You have something, David?
Yeah, I think I may be the only item.
Staff report? Okay.
I don't think there's otherwise a staff report. I just wanted to update the board, and I want to note I gave Steve Hall an ample opportunity to leave before I gave my report, although he didn't know what I was going to say. I was going to report on outside counsel costs, so it's still time to leave. You know, as you may remember, you, via contract, appointed the county counsel's office as the general counsel. You gave the county counsel's office authority to retain outside counsel. We've done that. We've done it twice. We retained Steve Hall, I want to say back in April, and we retained the Hogan firm today. And the costs of outside counsel, I would estimate at this point, before I am able to get a contract to you, will certainly exceed $100,000, which is more than the $25,000 of authority that you gave me. And I want to explain that in context. The issue, I would be happy to bring a contract back to you. The issue is that the JPA doesn't have any money yet. So you could approve a contract, but it couldn't get paid. So I am actually contracting with the outside counsel through the county, so that the county, which actually holds money that it is set aside to pay for startup costs, is available to pay outside counsel, because as nice as Steve is, he does want to have his bills paid. So I did want to let you know that I was expending those costs. They are significant, and eventually you will get a full accounting, and I will come to you with a contract when you have the money to pay for it. But I didn't want you to be surprised that I was expending more money. This money will eventually actually be part of the money that the county recoups, and an agreement will come to you on that as well, both related to the loan and the money that the county has advanced. I'm happy to take any questions, but this is really just informational because, I believe it's my responsibility to keep you informed of things that I'm doing, and one of the things that I'm doing is ensuring that you have the outside counsel that you need to get these deals done. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Do we have any other staff updates? I know Jan, of course, gave us. Then I think we are prepared to adjourn. Thank you, everyone. A little early. Get ready for that long meeting next time. Yeah. You're still the head, right? Oh, that's fun. Yeah, that's fun.
No, actually, it's, you know what,
Redwood City downtown. So there's a county center there. That's with the building. No, it's Thanks.
Hey, Liz.
This is Catherine. My girls will go crazy over
this is George. These are mine. Wow, I love your coat. That's so cute. I love it. It's really, I love that. So this is Catherine and George. They're almost. They're about a year and a half apart. No, Catherine's Irish twins. As of today. Well, sorry, they graduated yesterday for third and fourth grade. Separated. Sometimes I'll wake up and I'm not sure why I'm waking up and I'll look at my eyes. It's like this far off my nose. And then it says, you're awake! This is Catherine and George. I'm trying to make your My name is head of South San Francisco. Remember when you see it written on the hill when you drive by? Yeah, it's South San Francisco Industrial City. That's the city. What did I do?